All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, here comes another amazing story from Santa Papa John with Storytime by Santa. Come on in, my merry friends. Pull up your blankets, wiggle into your coziest spot you can find, and let your imagination sparkle tonight, because this story is filled with snow, wonder, laughter, and a very special sleigh. This story is called The Polar Bear Cub and the Crystal Sleigh. Far, far to the north, where the snow glittered like sugar under the moonlight and the stars shone so bright they seemed to hum little songs across the sky, there stood the North Pole. Now, most folks think that the North Pole is only about workshops and toy shelves and reindeer polishing their harness bells. And yes, it certainly has those things, but it is also a wide snowy fields, frozen lakes, sparkling ice caves, and quiet hills where the wind dances over the drifts and makes the snow look like silver ribbons. And in one of those snowy places not far from Santa's village lived a young polar bear cub named Pippin. Pippin was small for a polar bear cub, not tiny, mind you, but he was still larger than a wheelbarrow and much fluffier than a snow pillow. But for a polar bear, he was on the smaller side. Pippin had bright black eyes, a curious nose, and paws that were always getting him into adventures before his good sense had fully caught up. He loved sliding down snowy hills. He loved catching snowflakes on his tongue. He loved watching the reindeer practice flying turns over the frozen lake. And more than anything in the whole world, Pippin loved sleighs. Big sleighs, little sleighs, delivery sleighs, practice sleighs, decorated parade sleighs. He loved the runners, he loved the bells, he loved the polished wood and the gliding sound over snow. He especially loved Santa's sleigh, of course, because who wouldn't? But hidden away in the North Pole's oldest workshop was a sleigh even more mysterious than Santa's. It was known as the Crystal Sleigh. Now, my friends, the Crystal Sleigh was not made for Christmas deliveries. Oh no! It was much older than that. It had been built long ago by a team of master elves who knew how to shape snow glass, frost crystal, moon silver, and winter light into something beautiful and strong. Its runners shimmered like frozen moonbeams. Its sides sparkled like a morning ice on a window. And when the northern lights danced in the sky, their colors glowed softly inside the sleigh as if it had swallowed a rainbow and kept it warm. The crystal sleigh was used only for special moments, for ceremonies, for celebrations, for the first snowfall feast. And once every year on the night of the winter welcome, it was brought out for all to admire. Pippin had seen it from a distance once, just once, and never since then he has dreamed about it. One morning, as the pale golden sunlight spilled across the snow, Pippin tumbled down a little hill near the workshop square and landed in a puff of snow right at the feet of Tinsel, one of Santa's oldest and wisest elves. Tinsel wore a long green coat, silver spectacles, and a hat so pointy it seemed to make decisions before the rest of him did. "Good morning, Pippin," said Tinsel. Pippin popped up, snow in his ears and a grin on his face. "Good morning, Mr. Tinsel. You appear to have arrived by rolling." "It's faster," said Pippin. Tinsel looked thoughtfully. "Not always." Pippin giggled. Then his eyes drifted towards the tall doors of the old crystal workshop. "Mr. Tinsel," he said, lowering his voice, "is the crystal sleigh really inside?" Tinsel adjusted his spectacles. "It is." Pippin's nose twitched. May I see it? Tinsel smiled kindly. From the doorway, yes, but only from the doorway. Pippin nodded so hard his ears wiggled. Oh, yes, sir, only from the doorway. Tinsel opened the grand workshop door just wide enough for them to step inside, and there, resting on a snowy white platform beneath hanging lanterns, stood the crystal sleigh. Pippin gasped. It was even more beautiful than he remembered. It glowed softly in the quiet light. Tiny frost patterns curled across the sides like painted vines. The seat looked cushioned with silver blue velvet. The bells hanging from the rail were clear as ice and chimed with the gentlest sound, as though they were whispering instead of ringing. Pippin whispered and stared. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, he whispered. Tinsel nodded. She is lovely. Does she fly? Yes. Fast? Very. Can anyone ride in it? Only when invited. Pippin looked up hopefully. Tinsel chuckled. That was a very large, hopeful face. Pippin blinked. Did it work? Not today, said Tinsel. Pippin gave a little sigh, though not a grumpy one, just a fluffy, disappointed one. Then Tinsel added, but perhaps one day, if you prove yourself worthy. Pippin straightened at once. Worthy? Tinsel nodded. The crystal sleigh is not impressed by size or speed or showing off. Pippin tilted his head. What is it impressed by? Tinsel smiled. A good heart. Well, now, that gave Pippin something very big to think about. For the rest of the day he wandered the village wondering what exactly a sleigh would consider proof of a good heart. Maybe it wants someone brave, he said aloud, then stopped. What if it wants someone neat, he added. This worried him a little because Pippin was not what anybody would call a tiny cub. Not messy in a terrible way, just naturally snowy. By afternoon he went to ask his best friend, Juniper, a young fox who lived near the lantern sheds. Juniper was quick, clever, and had a tail so fluffy it looked like she'd borrowed part of it from a cloud. Pippin found her balancing on a snowbank trying to catch falling pine needles in a mitten. Juniper, he called. She missed the pine needles and landed in the snow with a squeak. That was nearly graceful, she said. Pippin hardly noticed. The crystal sleigh only lets worthy hearts ride in it. Juniper sat up. That sounds very serious. It is. What counts as worthy? Pippin slumped down beside her. I don't know. Juniper thought for a moment. Then she said, probably kindness. Pippin nodded slowly. I can do kindness. Yes, said Juniper, though do try not to do it by accident. That can get confusing. So Pippin set out to be very, very worthy. First, he helped old Miss Peppermint, a round little elf with rosy cheeks, carry 3 baskets of ribbon from the bow house to the wrapping shed. He carried all 3 at once. This would have been very impressive, except he also carried them upside down. By the time he arrived, the ribbons had trailed behind him through the snow like a parade of spaghetti. Mrs. Peppermint looked at the tangled snowy ribbons and said, well, your spirit was excellent. Pippin drooped. I'm sorry. She patted his paw. Kindness counts even when ribbons suffer. Next, Pippin tried helping the reindeer by stacking polished harness rings near the stable. He stacked them so neatly that he smiled at his own work. Then a tiny sneeze came from his nose. Ha, ha, ha. Juniper, who had come to check on him, backed away. Pippin, ha, ha, ha-shoo! The ring shot in the air, bounced across the stable floor, and one landed on Comet's antler. Comet stared cross-eyed at it. Juniper covered her mouth to keep from laughing. Pippin buried his head in his paws. I was trying to be worthy. Comet gently shook the ring off and nuzzled Pippin's shoulder. It's all right, little cub, he said. You are trying to help. That's what matters. Pippin peeked out. It does? It does, said Comet. Though perhaps next time sneeze away from the hardware. That evening, Pippin sat by the frozen pond looking a little wilted. The stars glittered overhead, the village lights twinkled in the distance. Somewhere a chorus of elves were practicing a song for the Winter Welcome Festival. Juniper sat beside him. You're making a face of someone who has misplaced a pie, she said. I don't think I'm good at worthy, Pippin sighed. Juniper was quiet for a moment. Then she said, maybe being worthy isn't about getting everything right. Pippin looked at her. Then what is it? Maybe it's about caring enough to keep trying. Pippin thought about that, and because he was a thoughtful little cub, even if his thoughts sometimes arrived with snow in their ears, he let that idea settle in his heart. The next morning, all the North Pole buzzed with excitement. It was the day before the winter welcome. The lanterns were being hung, the pathways were swept smooth, the crystal workshop was opened for final polishing. Everywhere Pippin looked, elves hurried with garlands, trays of treats, bundles of evergreen, and armfuls of velvet banners. Pippin wanted very badly to help, but this time he decided not to start by carrying 3 things upside down. Instead, he watched, listened, and looked for what truly needed doing. That, my merry friends, is a very wise thing to do sometimes. Near the lantern bridge, he found a tiny snow hare shivering beside a broken sled. One runner had cracked, and the little hare looked close to tears. Pippin approached slowly. Hello, the hare sniffled. My name is Myra. I'm Pippin. What happened? I was bringing silver berries for the feast and my sled hit a bump. Now the runner is broken and I can't pull it by myself. Pippin looked at the little sled. It was full of delicate silver berries, tiny glowing fruits used to decorate winter cakes and pudding swirls. If they tipped, they'd roll everywhere. Pippin crouched low. I can help, he said. Myra looked doubtfully. Really? Pippin nodded, but this time he did not grab the sled all at once. He remembered the ribbon, the harness rings, the sneeze. He took a deep breath and said, let's do this carefully. Together they unloaded the berries into little baskets first. Then Pippin gently lifted the sled while Myra tied the broken runner with sturdy twine. The ribbon still looked wobbly. Pippin said, wait here. He hurried to the woodshed, found 2 young elves sanding toy blocks, and asked politely if they had a spare strip of smooth ash wood. They did. He brought it back, and with Myra holding the twine and Pippin steadying the sleigh, they fixed the runner well enough to glide again. Myra's eyes shone. You saved the berries. Pippin smiled. We saved the berries. They loaded the baskets back on and pulled together all the way to the feast hall. At the door, Myra turned and hugged one of the Pippin's legs. Now a snow hare hugging a polar bear's leg is one of the sweetest sights in the north. Thank you, she said. Pippin felt warm all the way to his ears. Later that same day, another little problem appeared. Because the North Pole is magical, yes, but it's full of everyday happenings too. At the edge of the square, young elf twins, Pip and Plum, were trying to string crystal lights between 2 poles. Unfortunately, that latter had sunk crooked into the snow, and the box of lights had tangled into what Plum described as a sparkly noodle disaster. Pippin ambled over. Need help? Pippin looked at the tangle and sighed desperately. This time Pippin did not leap in. He did not grab all the strings at once. He did not sneeze. Instead, he sat down beside the box and carefully held each line while the twins untangled them. "You're very patient," said Plum. Pippin blinked. "No one ever said that before." Plum grinned. "Maybe it's your new thing." When the lights were finally hung, they glowed in a line of soft blue-white stars from one pole to the other. Pip clapped, "Beautiful!" Pippin looked up at them and smiled. Juniper, who had been watching from a snowdrift, called out, "Now that is worthy work." Pippin's chest puffed a little, not in a bragging way, in a hopeful way. That evening, just as the pink winter sunset faded into deep blue, a small bell rang through the square. Tinsel stood on the steps of the crystal workshop. "Elves, friends, and honored guests," he announced, "tomorrow the crystal sleigh will lead the winter welcome procession as it has for many years." Everybody clapped. "Yay!" Pippin clapped too, though his heart gave one tiny hopeful skip. Then Tinsel continued, "This year we require one helper to ride beside me and carry the star lantern for the procession." The crowd buzzed. Even Juniper's tail fluffed up. Tinsel lifted a hand. The one chosen must be careful, kind, and steady of heart. Pippin held his breath so long Juniper nudged him. "Breathing helps," she whispered. Tinsel looked over the gathered crowd, then smiled. "Pippin the polar bear," he said, "would you come forward?" Now, John, if a cub can become a snow statue, Pippin nearly did. Juniper had to poke him twice before he moved. "Me?" Pippin squeaked. "You," said Tinsel. Pippin padded forward, eyes wide. "But I thought worthy meant getting everything right." Tinsel bent down and rested a hand on Pippin's shoulders. "No," he said gently, "worthy means caring enough to help, learning from your mistakes, and choosing kindness even when no one is watching." Pippin swallowed hard. Then he smiled, the biggest smile Juniper had ever seen on a bear face. "I'll do my very best." "I know you will," said Tinsel. The next night, the entire North Pole glowed with celebration. Lanterns lit every path, snowflakes shimmered in the air, and music floated from the feast hall and curled around the rooftops like happy smoke. And there, outside the crystal workshop, stood the crystal sleigh. More beautiful than ever, the northern lights painted green and velvet across its shining sides. The bells chimed softly. The runners glowed like silver ice. Pippin climbed in carefully beside Tinsel, holding the star lantern in both paws. The lantern itself was made of clear crystal with a golden star flame glowing in the center. "Remember," Tinsel said softly, "steady heart." Pippin nodded. Steady heart. The procession began. Slowly, beautifully, the crystal sleigh glided through the village. Children cheered, elves waved, reindeers stamped happily at the edge of the square. Snow sparkled around the runners as if the sleigh were riding light across the ground. Pippin held the lantern carefully. He looked at the smiling faces, at Juniper hopping with excitement, at Mira the snow hare waved both paws, at Pip and Plum pointing at the crystal lights they had hung, and in a moment he understood something wonderful. The crystal sleigh had not chosen him because he was the fastest cub or the grandest helper or the neatest ribbon carrier in the north. It had chosen him because he had learned to care, to notice, to try anything, to help with gentleness, And my friends, those are beautiful things. When the procession reached center square, Tinsel nodded to Pippin. Would you like to ring the crystal bells? Pippin's eyes widened. Oh, yes, please. He reached up and gave the bells the softest tap. They rang out pure and clear over the snowy village. Everyone grew quiet for a moment listening. The sounds were like starlight made into music. Then cheers rose all around them. Pippin laughed, a deep, happy, rumbly cub laugh. The kind that starts in the heart and comes rolling out warm and joyful. Later, after the feast and the songs and the final swirl of lantern lights, Pippin and Juniper sat together on the snowy hill above the village. The crystal sleigh rested below, still glowing softly in the moonlight. Well, Juniper, you look very official. Pippin grinned. Did I? Extremely. They sat in happy silence for a moment. Then Pippin said, I used to think beautiful things were the most important part of the magic. Juniper tilted her head. And now? Pippin looked down at the village, at the friends below, at the stars above. Now I think the most important is what beautiful things help us remember. Juniper smiled. That sounded wise. Pippin nodded seriously. I got it from being worthy. Juniper burst out laughing and rolled backwards into the snow. Pippin laughed too, and from then on everyone around admired the crystal sleigh and wondered who was once ridden in it with the star lantern. The story was told of a small polar bear cub named Pippin. The cub who had sneezed harness rings onto a reindeer, a cub who had learned that a good heart is not measured by perfection, but by kindness, patience, and trying again. And every year after that, when the winter welcome came around, Pippin would stand near the crystal workshop and smile at the younger cubs and foxes and rabbits staring up in wonder. And if one would ask, how do you become worthy enough for the crystal sleigh? Pippin would bend down and say very gently, start with helping with a good heart and keep going. Wow! Being worthy doesn't not mean being perfect, getting everything right the first time, or never making mistakes. True worth comes from having a kind heart, learning from what goes wrong, helping others with care, and choosing to keep everything when things feel hard or clumsy. When we are patient, thoughtful, and brave enough to grow, we discover the most beautiful magic in the world is the goodness we carry inside us. Amazing. Truly amazing. Folks, another amazing story from Santa Papa John for Storytime by Santa. Come back tomorrow and enjoy another wonderful story. Ho, ho, ho! Santa loves you.